And I initially didn't think about bringing this specific topic up today, right? When I woke up this morning and I was looking at the list of things that I wanted to go over on today's radio program, I didn't necessarily have this on my radar. And sometimes these topics come up organically, right? You know, I drive into work just like all you guys do. And on my way in, I was listening to the Ryan Ursillo podcast, and he had Todd McShay on. And, of course, we're getting to draft season. The Combine just ended. And I'm personally not a huge fan of the Combine. I think it puts a lot of stock in certain things that don't matter. Like if somebody can run a fast 40, but they can't, catch the football. I call this the Darius Hayward-Bay rule. Like if a guy runs a really good 40, but he's not as fast in pads, and he, of course, at wide receiver can't catch a football, then I don't understand why GMs and owners drool over prospects like that. Sometimes what we like to call the Underwear Olympics or the NFL Scouting Combine is really good at tricking the human beings that make the decisions of putting together an NFL roster on a year-to-year basis. Sometimes we put way too much stock in, a 3-cone drill, right? Or certain drills that dudes are doing without pads. I, for one, am not that interested in maybe how somebody can run without pads. I want to know how fast you are with pads on. I want to know how productive you are as a football player. And South Carolina's Nick Emmanwori was an incredibly productive football player last year. Now, I know my audience. I know we've all been watching South Carolina football, and over the last 3 years, we've seen a significant growth from someone like Nick Emmanwori, a local kid who played over at Irmo High School, came here at South Carolina already as a great athlete and a hard hitter, but we saw his production grow. We saw his development happen before our very eyes here in Columbia, South Carolina, with how he became a more complete safety. He wasn't just the hard hitter who struggled in coverage. He wasn't just the guy that struggled against Florida when Ricky Pearsall went bananas at Williams-Brice Stadium and gave South Carolina a home loss. That wasn't his best game. But after that, you saw significant improvement. He made a huge play in the Kentucky game in 2023 here at Willie B with an interception in the end zone that helped save that game all year long. He had a pick 6 against Kentucky here this past season in Lexington. He's made some fantastic plays, has put some incredible tape out there, and honest to God, turned himself into one of the best safeties in all of college football. We here in Columbia, South Carolina, need no introduction to how good a football player Nick Emmanwori became over the course of the last 3 years. Anyone that's just watched college football and put the tape on can tell that this guy has NFL traits. But not everybody watches South Carolina football the way we do, which is why I'm kind of fascinated when I hear the input of guys and girls who are paid to watch football and to evaluate prospects and have been doing this for a long time. Todd McShay is one of those people. Todd McShay is, on ESPN for a long time, joined Ryan Ursillo on the Ryan Ursillo podcast, and I turned this on because I like to, hear what he had to say initially about the quarterbacks, right? Because I'm still kind of fascinated about the dichotomy between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Are any of these guys worth, top 5 picks in the NFL draft? I wanted to hear Todd McShay's, thoughts on that, but Ryan Ursillo opened up the show and asked Todd McShay, out of all the things that he is most impressed with from the scouting combine this past week, what was it? Well, here's McShay's answer.
I would say the biggest thing probably was Nick Emmanwori's workout. Safety from South Carolina. I mean, obviously we can get into the quarterbacks, we can get into all the buzz, we can get into wide receivers. The running back class is as good as advertised. But there's only a few times that you can legitimately say a human being shouldn't be able to do this. And Emmanwori was one of those times. I think back to Calvin Johnson, right? DK Metcalf. Just look at him, pulling up the numbers right now. He is a massive safety, right? He's 6'3", 220 pounds. No one has ever done what he's done before. With the vertical jump that he was able to put, the broad jump of 11.6 at 220 pounds. to run as fast as Emmanwori did at 4.38. I just think, he's a player that was always kind of in that late first round discussion. I think the way the NFL is now with, looking for long safeties, chess pieces, guys that can cover. We've seen what Hamilton's done in Baltimore. Just that versatility as an athlete. For me, he stole the show. You just don't see guys like that move and jump and participate in the way he did.
It shines a light on the athleticism that Nick Emmanwori has, and it's putting certain teams on notice. It caught the attention of Todd McShay, and if it's catching Todd McShay's attention, and the amount of teams he talks to on a daily basis, because his whole gig, right, is the NFL draft. This guy is as in tune with NFL front offices and where they lean with their decision making for the draft every single year. This guy's as tuned in as anybody else. When he releases a mock draft, it's not just his evaluation of a player, but it's the beat that he's getting and the feeling he gets and the info that he's been able to obtain from talking to GMs, scouts, legitimate front office members who are making these decisions for these NFL teams. And if his biggest takeaway from the combine was Nick Emmanwori's freakish athleticism that just jumped off the charts, then NFL teams are talking about that. So my feeling of Nick Emmanwori being a first-round pick has only raised a little bit, not because I need to see anything more. I've seen enough to know Nick Emmanwori is an NFL caliber safety. You all that are listening or watching on our YouTube stream understand how good of a safety Nick Emmanwori is. But for maybe the casual football fan, if all they know about certain college players is how useful they could be in the NFL or what they see in the combine, then Nick Emmanwori's stock certainly grew, at least to the public. And it certainly seems like it has behind closed doors with NFL GMs and their front offices. I thought that was fascinating because Nick Emmanwori is, I mean, don't even know if you can say that there was a more productive safety in college football considering how great he was in coverage. One of the few safeties to have, a PFF coverage grade well above 83. You look at someone like Malachi Starks, who was in the high 70s. Malachi Starks is the player that's kind of been compared to Nick Emmanwori in this safety class. Most mock drafts or most big boards that I've looked at this offseason have kind of shooed in Malachi Starks as the number one safety in the NFL draft, or at least the safety that's going to go off the board first. Most mock drafts have him going off the board first. Most big boards have Starks ahead of Emmanwori. That's not necessarily my assessment. I think Nick has better size. I think Nick is more versatile. He's taken a different variety of snaps and where he was positioned on the field. He can certainly help you with run defense a lot more than I believe Malachi Starks can because of that size and just the production we saw at this level of him being able to stop the run, being put in the box a little bit. The way Clayton White used him last year, I thought was brilliant. I thought that really highlighted the diverse set of skills that he has, which certainly translates to the NFL level. And then when kind of elaborating on Nick Emmanwori's skill set and how maybe some teams might start viewing him as good or if not better than Malachi Starks, who, again, the consensus, putting this in air quotes, number one safety in the draft. Todd McShay did go on to do a little bit of compare and contrast as it pertains to Nick Emmanwori's NFL prospects and how Malachi Starks is as a prospect when it came to the combine.
Yeah, and there was a discussion, right? Like Malachi Starks coming into the year was like everyone was kind of mocking him or ranking him somewhere in the top 10, 12 players from Georgia. Didn't have the best year. He made some mistakes, kind of playing hero ball at times. But still a phenomenal player. So I think the question was coming into this, is one going to separate from the other? And we knew Emmanwori was going to have a good workout. And they're not like identical players, but they're both versatile players that can play the run, can line up in different spots, can play in some man, can play in zone. And if you're looking for a differentiator, we just got it, right? I mean, you wake up that morning, what was it, Friday, and you're Starks, you're like, all right, let's go out there and show the world what I got. And he doesn't have he's 6'1", almost 200 pounds, runs a 4.5, pretty, above average for a safety. And you look across and you're like, this guy, Emmanwori, he's like 4 inches taller, 23 pounds heavier. my 4-5 stacked against his 4-3-8. You know, it's just like, it's not a fair fight. And I think when teams are looking for traits and looking for a player that can do different things and can make you multiple on the defensive side, Emmanwori, I mean, I don't know that any player truly helped themselves more than he did.
Certainly helped himself in terms of his perception. And look, I like Malachi Starks a lot. He's a safety on a Georgia team that played a vital role. I thought the interesting of maybe playing hero ball from Todd McShay was, I thought that to be maybe telling as to what he saw on the tape. I didn't maybe have the same observation of Malachi Starks, but Todd McShay, quite frankly, does peruse over the All-22 a lot closer than I do. He goes through it with a fine-tooth comb, and anybody that does that, I'll take their opinion about these prospects with pretty serious consideration. And I like how productive Starks was at Georgia. Anybody that stars on that defense and has normally starred in the NFL. I think the Philadelphia Eagles had a pretty interesting game plan to just draft the best defensive players from the Philadelphia Eagles, like when they took Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean in the same draft after they had one of the more dominant defenses in the history of college football. And I think that worked out for them pretty well. They are the Super Bowl champions. But at the same time, watching both of these safeties, and I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here in a radio studio in Columbia, South Carolina, and that I cover the South Carolina Gamecocks for a living, but I do genuinely believe that Nick Emmanwori is a more versatile type of safety that probably translates better to the NFL. Malachi Starks may have better upside, but I think if I'm a GM and I'm taking a safety, I really need a safety, and I need somebody who is going to be the best bet at being successful in the NFL and maybe having an all-pro type career ahead of him, I think I would take Nick. Look, you look at certain teams at the back end of the first round. Two that come to mind are the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills need help in the defensive secondary. Before the season, they had to get rid of some of those players back there. I think about Micah Hyde, who they had to part ways with before the season started because the Bills are about to enter salary cap hell based on how much they're paying Josh Allen, and that defensive backfield became the casualty of that massive cap hit. The Ravens, on the other hand, do have an all-pro safety in Kyle Hamilton, a guy who's my favorite safety in the league right now. They did sign Marcus Williams from New Orleans a couple of years ago. He's had some health issues he's been fine when he's on the field, but he's not been as reliable as they would like for him to be in terms of just showing up and being able to give you 15 out of 17 games, right? If they can pair Nick Emmanwori with Kyle Hamilton, we're looking at a defensive backfield in Baltimore that might be one of the best if not the best in the NFL, because we see what Nick's ceiling can be. We've seen Nick do this against SEC competition, and we've seen him do it at a really high level. That would be the most intriguing fit for me for Nick, because I would love to see that pairing with Kyle Hamilton. The Bills just might need him a little bit more.